The Gemara in Masechet Shah. It's interesting that the theme of Chanukah is developed in the Talmud, not in a separate Masechta. It's well known. There's a separate Masechta for Purim, Megillah, and of course all the other holidays, not Shavuos because there aren't any mitzvos, but Chanukah is discussed in the second chapter of Masechet Shabbos, and the context is one which is very familiar to all of us because we typically in Erev Shabbos, on the night of Shabbos, we recite the Mishnayos of Bameh Madlikin when we talk about Shabbos candles. Bameh Madlikin, Bameh Ein Madlikin. What kind of oils? What kind of wicks you can use? When you light the Shabbos candles. The purpose of Shabbos candles are Shalom Bayis, and in the context of all of that, the Talmud transitions into the question of what kind of candles and what kind of wicks and what kind of oil can be used for Chanukah candles, both during the week and on Shabbos as well. So the Gemara in Daf Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph, on the bottom in Masechet Shabbos says, Amar Rav Huna said that psilos ushmanim, that means the wicks and the oils, which are not supposed to be used on Shabbos. Now, why aren't they supposed to be used on Shabbos? There's a whole group of these oils and wicks that shouldn't be used because they're not, the flame isn't steady, it's jumpy. And number one, it often goes out. Number two, even if it doesn't go out, if you're trying to read or to do something to the light of the candle, the concern is that it's flickering here and there, so you'll be tempted, to fix it. So those wicks and those oils that don't provide a steady flame should be avoided, when it comes to Shabbos candles. So now the Gemara wants to know, what about for Chanukah? Can you use the less than steady oils and wicks for Chanukah or not? So the Gemara says, Psilos Ushmanim, the oils and the wicks, which you're not supposed to use for Shabbos, Ein Madlikim Behem B'Chanukah. You really shouldn't use them for Chanukah either. Bein B'Shabbos, Bein B'Chol, whether it be on the days of the week of Chanukah, like tonight, or every Chanukah has a Shabbos Chanukah because it's 8 days. So obviously there's a Shabbos. So you shouldn't use them not on Erev Shabbos when you light candles and not on the rest of the week either. Why not? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba, my time of the Rav Huna. What's the reason? Kasabar kabsa zakukla. So this is important. He says, because Rav Huna was of the opinion that if you light Chanukah candles and it blows out right away, or before the time frame that is necessary for it to burn, kavsa, if it went out, then zakukla, you have to relight it. And therefore, the concern is that if you use bad oils or bad wicks, it'll go out and you're supposed to relight it. And if you forget to relight it, then you won't properly fulfill the mitzvah. So you should use more reliable and steady oils and wicks. Moreover, mutar lishtamish la'ora, according to Rav Huna, you're allowed to benefit from the Neiros Chanukah. And therefore, on Shabbos of Chanukah, we're also worried that, if it's flickering, that, if you're reading L'or Haner or something like that, you'll be tempted to fix it a little bit. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. So because if it extinguishes, you have to relight it, and you're allowed to use it. Therefore, you should avoid the same things you should avoid for Shabbos candles, you should avoid for Chanukah candles. That is the view of Rav Huna. But then the Gemara says that Rav Chisda Amar, Rav Chisda said no, Madlikin Bahen B'chol Avalo B'Shabbos. Actually, even if the oils and wicks are not very effective, meaning they're not as reliable, they require sometimes, that you intervene to fix it a little bit. Nonetheless, you could use them for Chanukah candles, even though you can't use them for Shabbos candles. But on Shabbos, you shouldn't use them. Why? Kasavar kapsa ein zakukla, because the Mandamar of Chizda says that if it extinguishes, then actually you just leave it alone. You're not supposed to relight it. If the candles go out before the proper burning time, but you in good faith, you lit them, then you don't have to relight or reignite the candles.
Rosensweig,
Yeah.
what Masechta is Rabbi reading from again?
Masechet Shabbos.
Shabbos. Okay, so quick question.
Yeah.
So it is it more important for the lights to go longer on Shabbos or Chanukah? Because that's what we're talking about.
We're not. It's not a question of how that's a different question. Meaning, the Chanukah candles only need to go as long as they need to go. We'll get to that in a second.
About 30 minutes.
What's that?
So there's a time, like 30 minutes. There's a minimum.
Yeah, but on Shabbos, of course, they should on the challenge of lighting. We'll get to this in a few minutes, but the challenge of lighting Hanukkah candles in advance of Shabbos is that you want them to burn like 30 minutes after Shkia.
Correct.
Right. Whereas the Shabbos candles you want to burn, if possible, even more than that, because they're Mishum Shalom Bayis. But as we'll see, we're talking about the quality of the light right now, not the quantity. But what I'm really getting at is there's an argument in the Gemara whether kavsa zakukla or kavsa ein zakukla. When you light Hanukkah candles and they become extinguished by accident, the wind blows them out, the whatever it is, the oil that the wicks, whatever it is, it doesn't take, so it flickers, it's on for a few minutes, and then it goes out. It happens all the time. So the first Manda Amar Rav Huna says you have to relight the candle. The second Manda Amar Rav Chizda says that you do not, and therefore he says that even if you use inferior wicks and oil, it doesn't really matter, because if it goes out, it goes out. As long as you made a good faith effort and you put the amount of oil and the size of the wicks was such that it could burn for the half an hour after Shkia, that's good enough. Then the Gemara says, but for Shabbos, it would still be a problem because mutar lishtamish laora, because you're allowed to, according to this view, you're allowed to use the candle for your own purposes as well. And therefore, we're worried that if it's flickering, that you will play with it. Then there's a third mandamar, Amrab Zeir, this is on Chaf Aleph on the base. I don't know how many of you finally got the Marmakomos, but Amrab Masta, Amarab Zeira Amarab, Psilos Ishmanim, Shamru Chachamim, Ein Madlikim B'Shabbos, Madlikim Ben B'Chanukah, Bein B'Chol, Bein B'Shabbos. You actually could use even these inferior wicks and oils for Chanukah on Shabbos Chanukah as well, meaning in advance of Shabbos Chanukah, as well as during the week of Chanukah. Amar Birmia Mai Taima, Kasava Kavsa Ein Zakukla, because again, if it goes out, you're not obligated to relight it. The Asr Li Shtamesh Laora, and you're also, according to him, not allowed to use the light. And therefore, we're not worried about a Shabbos problem. Somehow I seem to have gotten off here. One second. Oh, there I'm back at least. Okay. I don't see anybody else, but I'm here. And therefore, you would be able, there'd be even more flexibility. You'd be able to use the lights and the wicks, the oil and the wicks that are prohibited for use for Shabbos candles could be used for Hanukkah candles. And then the Gemara says, Amru Rabbanan Kami Dabaya, Mishmeid Rabbi Yirmiyah, below Kibla. This final ruling was told by the Rabban, and Abaya was told this in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, below Kibla. He was very skeptical about it, so he didn't accept it. Ki Asa Rabin, but when Rabin came, Amru Rabbanan Kami Dabaya, Mishmeid Rabbi Yochanan, said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the Kibla. And then he said, Izakoi Gamirta Lishmaita Mikara. He said, if I had been a meritorious person, if I deserved it, I would have accepted this ruling a long time ago. Says the Gemara, who cares? V'hagamra. Says the Gemara, nafkamina. Oh, I see. Very good. How do we do that? So the Gemara says, nafkamina legirsa diyankasa. Okay. Then the Gemara says, v'kavsa ein zakukla. If you have it, we're on the first of the Marmakomos.
Sheila.
What's that?
I said Sheila must have figured it away. Thank you.
Terrific. Can everybody see? So we are,
yes.
We're on the first page of these Marmakomos. I think we're going a little quick. Yes, if we could just stop there for a minute. So we're at the before it says Tosis, the Gemara says the kapsa aim zakukla. Is it really true that if the light goes out, that you're not obligated to relight it? Viraminu mitzvasa mishatishka hachama ad shetichla regel manashuk. Don't we have an obligation that the candles should burn what we say half an hour, but it's really from shkia sachama, from sunset until people stop walking around in the public domain. So we say that's half an hour. In New York City, it's certainly many hours. The question is whether it's half hour or many hours. In fact, in terms of the lighting, we'll leave that for another time. Says the Gemara, my lab, the ikabsa hadar madlik. Also, if you, let's say you have candles and they go out, everybody see it? Veraminu mitzvasa, I can't point to it. So, my lab, the ikabsa, if it goes out, you would have to relight it. Says the Gemara, lo, that's not what the Gemara meant. What the Gemara meant was the ilo adlik madlik, meaning if you didn't get a chance to light candles yet, you have from shkia sakama until ad shetichla regel shuk to start lighting. Inami l'shiura, or it means how much oil and how large the wicks should be. It should have the potential to last that period of time, but if it blows out, it blows out. Viad kama ad dekalya rigla detar mudar. Okay, so what we have so far is a very interesting debate in the Gemara. If the candles, and this happens all the time, the Chanukah candles go out by accident, are you obligated to relight them, or you just, listen, you made a bracha, you lit them, you did the best you could, and that's good enough. You don't have to relight them if they went out. So if you look at Tosfos, it's the next Marmakom. I'm going to go to the last line of the Tosfos. The Chain Hilchasa, the Ner Chanukah, Asur Leishtamesh Laora, Karavu Krab Yochanan, Vaidbayinami Kibla, Rabbi Yosef Nami Mashma, the Kaman Sphere Lehachi, the Kavsa Ein Zakakla, the Kula Sphere Lehachi, Bravuna Yachidhu, Vele Sochasa Kavase. So the Gemara says, Tosa says, if you see this is the second Marmakom, it's like in the middle of the page, but the bottom of the Tosas says that we paskin what's called kafsa ein zakakla. Again, if anybody's having trouble following, or just shout out, because I don't see anybody. So I see pictures and names, but kafsa ein zak. We paskin kafsa ein zakakla, which means that if the Neiros Chanukah are extinguished, you are not obligated to rekindle them. The Rambam, if you continue down on the page, it says Rambam Hilchos Megillah B'Chanukah Perek Daled Halacha Hey. Right? Excellent. So the Rambam says, Ein Madlikin Neiros Chanukah Kodem Shetishka Achama. You shouldn't light candles before Shkias Achama, before sunset, before it gets dark. Ela im Shkiasa, it should start at sunset. Lo ma'acharin, velo makdimin. Not earlier, not later, not earlier. Shach, I'm not talking about Erev Shabbos, we'll get to Erev Shabbos. Shachach ohezid velo hidlik im Shkias Achama, if he didn't, somehow he forgot, or he just couldn't, or even if he was intentionally a little later, and he didn't start at sunset, madlik v'holech ad shetichla regel mashuk. He still has the ability to light the candles until, or as long as people are up and about outside. The kama huzman zeh, how long is that period of time? Kamo chatzi shah, oh yes, yoser. The Rambam says it's approximately half an hour. Again, this is an interesting question, whether in our time, when people are out in the streets after sunset for hours and hours, so would the right amount, would the right shiur be hours and hours, or would it still be half an hour? Okay. Of our zman zeh, after people are no longer walking around, right? Eino madlik. Then he says, "V'tzarech litein shemen b'ner." You have to put enough oil in the candles, kadei shetia dolekas v'holeches ad sheticha regel menashuk, until you have to have the requisite amount of candles of oil. Says the Rambam. And then he adds, hidlika v'kavsa, if you lit the candles and then they went out, eino zakuk lahadlika pamacheres. You're not obligated to rekindle them. Nishara dolekes achar shekolsa regel menashuk and matzah lechabosa lesalkos. And then Ram also says, let's say you put in so much oil that it continues to be burning even after people are no longer walking around or after the half an hour. Says the Rambam, if you want, you can extinguish it after the shiur. So what's the takeaway so far? There's a machlokas in the Gemara whether kavsa zakukla or ein zakukla, whether or not if the candles go out, you have to relight them or not. That sounds like a very fundamental argument. And surprisingly, the Gemara's conclusion, Tosaf's conclusion, Rambam's conclusion, look at the Shulchan Aruch for a moment. The Shulchan Aruch's conclusion. Look at on the bottom of page 1, you'll see it says Shulchan Aruch. I guess you don't have pages here. 1 second. You'll see we have Shuta Rajba. We're going to skip that for a moment. Yeah, if you see on it says Shulchan Aruch Aruch Chaim Hilchos Chanukah Siman Taf Reish Ayin Gimel Sif Beis, and then you'll see a whole bunch of letters. So the Shulchan Aruch says Hadlaka Osa Mitzvah. We'll get to that in a second. The mitzvah is to kindle. Lefikach, therefore, in Kavsa Kodim She'avar Zmana Eino Zakuk La. If it goes out by accident before it burnt the requisite amount of time, since you lit it properly, you're not obligated to relight it. And then he adds, Yafilu Kavsa Be'erev Shabbos. This is an interesting question. Let's say you lit the candles Erev Shabbos. So we have one of our members joining us. Good to see you. So we have, let's say we lit the candles on Erev Shabbos, in advance of Shabbos. Now, when you light the candles Erev Shabbos, it's particularly an interesting question because due to the prohibition of malacha on Shabbos, right, you can't light them at sunset because that would be a violation of one of the malachos of Shabbos. So what we do, as I'm sure everybody's aware, is that we light on Erev Shabbos well in advance, right? Let's say, if Mincha is at 4:15 or so around now, so and that's when Mincha is Erev Shabbos. So typically around 3:30 or 3:45 or 4, people are lighting Neiros Shabbos, even though it only gets dark, at 4:40 or something of that. Normally you would light 4:45.
Is there an Indian stop mincha before you light?
What's that? Is
there an Indian mincha before you light Erev Shabbos, or does it make a difference?
It would probably be better. But either way, you're lighting in advance. So the question is, let's say you light in advance, and let's say it goes out. So is that the same as if it goes out in a typical day before the Zman? In both cases, meaning normally you're supposed to light the candles. Let's assume for the moment they're supposed to last for half an hour. So let's say the typical case in the Gemara where there's a debate is it goes out after 10 minutes. It doesn't last half an hour. So our ruling is, we just showed, the Gemara, Tosfos, Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, everybody says, if it goes out, doesn't last a half an hour, you don't have to rekindle it. But let's say it goes out on Erev Shabbos. Let's say it's 4:00. Mincha's at 4:15. So on your way before you go to shul, you light candles. But it's much earlier because it isn't dark out. It's not the Zman of lighting, but it's the only way to light Erev Shabbos. So you lit the candle and at 4:00. And at 4:05, you still haven't gone to Mincha. Let's say you live only 5 minutes away from the Fifth Avenue Synagogue. So you only have to leave your house at 4:10. So you lit at 4:00, right? And at 4:05, you see it went out. Is that the same rule? Is that the same law or not? So the Shulchan Aruch says, quoting, we'll see in a moment, the Trumas Hadeshen, the afilu kavsa Erev Shabbos, even if it went out on Erev Shabbos, Kodem Kabbalah Shabbos, right? Jacob just asked me, is there an Inyan to daven mincha before you light the candles? It's preferable. But in many cases, when you go to shul, if you don't have the option to do that before, you couldn't find a minyan before, what happens? You light the candles, and then you go to mincha. So when let's say you daven mincha at 4:15, I don't know what the actual times are these days, but it's something like that. And then let's say you're going to be makabel
It's
Shabbos.
very accurate. It's 4:15. You hit
There you go. So then let's say at 4:30 you're going to be makabel Shabbos, or 4:20, let's say, right? Or 4:25 you're going to be makabel Shabbos. So let's say the candle went out already at 4. If you lit it at 4 o'clock, and at 4:05 it was already burnt. It extinguished.
So the question is, do you have to relight, or the question is, if you're at shul, if you're yotze? What are we asking here?
What are your two options? You were in and out.
In other words, if you're at shul, you wouldn't even know if it went out.
No. Forget about the shul. Let's say before you go to let's say on the way to shul, you're going to leave the shul at 4:10 because you live 5 minutes away from the shul. Okay, so you're light because you have family, etc. So you light at 4 o'clock, and you put in enough oil so that it should last till 5:15, because it's Erev Shabbos. You want it to burn on Shabbos. It should burn half an hour into Shabbos. You should put in that much oil or use bigger candles, etc. However, instead of going till 5:15, the candle blows out at 4:08, 2 minutes before you're leaving to shul.
So the question is, should you relight? Is that the question?
Yes,
that's the question.
That is the question.
Why,
if you don't have to relight,
who would say you don't relight? I mean, what's the logic for not lighting?
Well, let's say on a typical day, you light the candles. It's supposed to last half an hour, right?
Yes.
Let's say it blows out after 10 minutes. Do you have to relight?
Do you have to relight? Well, I mean,
that's what we've been discussing, right? That's my
right.
argument in the Gemara. Kavsa zakukla, kavsa ena zakukla.
Right.
We paskin, yes. You do not have to relight.
Right, but here it didn't even make it until the evening.
Exactly. So does that matter?
It's a different case.
No?
So it's worse. So I would think everyone would say.
But is it worse?
Everybody would say you have to light because you didn't make
it.
I'm trying to understand anyone that would say you don't have to light.
So the answer
is, what's the logic for not lighting? Are they trying to save you from not keeping Shabbos? Are they working with Chal Shabbos?
No. But the point is this: when you light, right, Erev Shabbos, do you make a bracha?
Yes.
Even though it's not the time yet, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So it is considered to be a proper hadlaka, even though it has to last into the night in order to, preferably, the shiur is different because it isn't dark yet. But it's still a bracha, it's still a hadlaka.
And if you light it, you have to make a new bracha? I'm saying, if you just relight it without a bracha?
Right, but the fact that you made a bracha and that when you, and had it not gone out, that would have been a proper hadlaka. The question is this: when we say kavsa ein zakukla, right, what is the basis for it? There could be two possibilities, and the nafkamina will be Erev Shabbos. One possibility is, what we're saying is, really, because what is kavsa ein zakukla all about? The question is, what is the relationship between the hadlaka, the act of igniting and lighting the Chanukah candles? What is the relationship between that and the effect? The fact that they are burning and the fact that they are being mefarsem es hanes, that they are publicizing the miracle. So let me go backwards. There's a mandamar, the first mandamar in the Gemara, Rav Huna, said that kavsa zakukla, meaning if you light during the right time, but it doesn't last, the full amount of time, then you have to relight. Why? Because he thinks that if you don't have the kiyum of pirsume nisa, right, of the effect of your lighting, if it's not burning for half an hour, then you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. And therefore, if you light it and it goes out, then you have to relight it. Meaning, what's important about this mitzvah is not the act of lighting, it is the effect of burning. But we paskin kavsa ein zakukla. We paskin that if it goes out within 10 minutes, even though you really had to put in enough oil and the goal is for it to burn for half an hour, we paskin that it doesn't make a difference. If it goes out, you're not allowed to blow it out, but if it goes out by accident, then that's okay.
But Rabbi,
Now, wait.
But that's different.
Wait,
That's
1 second.
different.
So the
Erev
question
Shabbos
is this: is the idea that the reason that kavsa ein zakukla is because even if it goes only for 10 minutes or it goes for 2 minutes,
It's
still
bismano.
considered. What's that?
At least it's bismano. You lit at night.
You lit at night, but in both cases, whether you light at night or whether you light Erev Shabbos, because that's the earliest you can light, that's still considered a proper lighting. That still requires a bracha, and it's still, you don't need to light after that. So the question is this: when we say kavsa ein zakukla, there can be two explanations. One is that all we really care about in the end of the day is the lighting. If you do a proper lighting, then the amount of its burning is a shiur. That's part of, you should light it so that it lasts. But if it doesn't last, but you lit it so it could last, that's good enough. If that's the case, then that's true Erev Shabbos as well. However, the other Manda Amar says that if you light it, you always need it for it to burn for a certain amount. It's not the lighting, it's the effect of it burning. However, l'chatchila, you need burning half an hour. If you intentionally curtail its ability to burn less than half an hour, then you've ruined the mitzvah. But if it has the ability to burn half an hour, as long as it burns within the zman anytime, that's still considered to be a proper Persume Nisa.
What I'm trying to
Nisa, so therefore, but if you light it on Erev Shabbos before the zman, even though that's the only time you can light it, that might be a proper hadlaka, but it's not a proper burning. And consequently, if it goes out, then you should have to reignite it. So this is a huge...
Except if it's getting very close to Shabbat, because the overbearing issue is Shabbat is from the Torah.
No, you for sure, you cannot...
Candles and regular candles, that's rabbin.
No, for sure. Right. No, you're, of course. I mean, you're not allowed to light it on Shabbat. The question is, if you haven't yet been Makabel Shabbos, let's say again, let's go to the time frame again. You're lighting the Chanukah candles Erev Shabbos at 4 o'clock. Mincha's at 4:15 in the shul, and Kabbalah Shabbos is at 4:22. After 4:22, you certainly cannot light because you're Makabel Shabbos. And you're quite right. Melach on Shabbos prevents you from doing anything rabbinic mitzvah of hadlakas ner Chanukah. But the question is, you lit,
for that matter,
right? You lit them with a bracha at 4 o'clock. The thing went out at 4:05. At 4:05, you weren't Makabel Shabbos yet. You're only going to be Makabel Shabbos at 4:22. Did
they have such precise time machines back when all of this?
No, nothing to do with time machines. Everybody knows when the point is, you on Erev, and I'm just giving you an example. It's not. It doesn't matter. The precision is not the problem. If everybody knows on Erev Shabbos, you have to light with enough time. You know, you need a half an hour before you're not allowed to light. So we know for sure that it went out at a time when you could relight from a malacha point of view, but the question is, are you obligated to? So if you paskin kavsa ein zakukla, which is how we paskin, meaning that if, let's say it's a regular night of the week, like tonight, let's say everybody lit tonight at 5 o'clock, right? And at 5 o'clock, it's already, after Shkia, right? So it's supposed to last, you're supposed to have it burn at least from 5 to 5:30. Let's say it went out at 5:10. So the halacha says you don't have to relight it. Kavsa ein zakukla. Kavsa ein zakukla means that if it went out, you still did your job. It's not your fault. You're not allowed to skimp on the amount, and you're not allowed to put it out. But if it goes out, the wind blows it out, or the wick, falls apart, then you don't have to relight it. Is that the same as Erev Shabbos or not? So Jacob is pointing out correctly. There's a difference. The question is it a difference that matters? The answer is from the perspective of the hadlaka. There's one hadlaka in both cases where you make a bracha. Is the idea of kavsa ein zakuk that the hadlaka is all that matters, as long as you have the potential for it to burn the proper amount? Or is the idea of kavsa ein zakuk the idea that even a minimum amount of burning within the shiur is sufficient, but it has to be within the shiur? So if it goes out Erev Shabbos before it's dark yet, then of course you have to relight it. So this is a major argument. This is a major
so just to be clear, there's a shita that holds that since you lit Erev Shabbos properly, even if it goes out in 3 seconds, you shouldn't relight it.
Or you don't need to relight it, correct?
Oh, that's a difference. So that's where I'm going. The difference is you don't need to, or you shouldn't. I'm trying to understand.
Well, it's you could light it without a bracha. There's no harm done. The question is, do you need to, or are you obligated, or are you? Is it up to you, or is it obligated to relight? So the Shulchan Aruch paskins that you do not need to light it again. Let me read the Shulchan Aruch. Wow. Hadlaka osa mitzvah. Well, but there are those who argue. I'll show you in a minute. Hadlaka osa mitzvah lefikach im kavsa kodim she'avar zamana ein zakuk la. V'afilu kavsa erev Shabbos, even if it goes on erev Shabbos, kodem kabbalas Shabbos, before you accept Shabbos upon you. So there's adayin hu midbod yom. It's still light outside, and there's no malacha. Nonetheless, the Shulchan Aruch paskins eino zakuk la. You are not obligated to relight it. Now this b'chein, okay, I'll give b'chein in a minute. This comes from a Trumas Hadesha. If you look on page 2, if you look on the second page of the Maramakomos, is a tshuva of the Trumas Hadeshan. Trumas Hadeshan, excellent. Stop. 1 second. Yeah, here it is. Trumas Hadeshan Simin Kuf Beis, perfect. It says She'ela, the question, the rule that you're not obligated to relight Ner Chanukah if it accidentally goes out, in Kavsa be'erev Shabbos, if it goes out Erev Shabbos, Kodem, Kabbalah Shabbos, before it's Kabbalah Shabbos, right? Sharei tzrichim lidlok mibod yom, because either way you have to light very early while it's light outside and there's no Shabbos yet. Zokukla kahai gavna olo. Are you obligated in that case to relight it? Would that be different than the classical case or not? So it says the Trumas Hadeshan, Tshuva, he answer, Yira, it seems to me, the ein zokukla afilu kahai gavna. Even in this circumstance, you're not obligated to relight. I afagav the kasav Mordechai sham. Even though the real Zman is after sunset, or below Kodem, because when it's light outside, people don't get the Pirsum Nisa of, you don't get the benefit because, the candles don't make an impression. Therefore, the main mitzvah is only going to be once it gets dark. Only if you wait till after it gets dark. So on Shabbos, it should last into, now again, if it goes out after Kabbalah Shabbos before dark, there's nothing you can do about it anyway, because by that time you can't do malacha. But if it's before Kabbalah Shabbos, you can make sure that it'll stay on until it's dark. Shouldn't you have to do that? We could have said, if it goes out before the Zman of the Kiyum HaMitzvah, you should have to relight it. Amnam, however, says the Trumas Hadeshan, midim avarchinan mibod yom asher kedeshana b'mitzvosa v'tzivanu lahadlik ner Chanukah afagav dakati like a mitzvah al korcha chaynu tama di'efshar be'inyan acher chashiva hechsher mitzvah. Says the Trumas Hadeshan, Erev Shabbos, this is the proper way to light. The proof is that we even make a bracha under these conditions. And since that's the proper way to light under these conditions, and you make a bracha, the concept of kavsa, ein, zakuk la will apply even on Erev Shabbos. However, and by the way, that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins based on the Trumas Hadeshen. However, the Marshal, if you look here on page number 3, I don't know if are we doing okay with the page numbers? There's a, you have to go a little to the next page. How do we do this? Can we flip this to the next page? The next page, Chuvas Marshal Siman Pehe. The Marshal says as follows. Let's see, 1 second. Yeah, keep going. Who's moving the thing? Is that Sheila? Whoever's doing it is doing a very good job. Keep going.
Sheila.
Oh, I feel badly. Are we taking her away from? Okay. Okay, keep going. Oh no, I'm sorry. We'll go back a little bit. Go back a little bit the other way. Stop. 1 second. Oh, here it is. Yeah, perfect. So you see toward about 2/3 of the way down the page, Shut Marshal Siman Pehe. The Marshal says, Number 1, he says, in general, let's say it goes out on a regular day. Let's say tonight you lit candles at 5 o'clock. It's supposed to last till 5:30 at least, and at 5:15 it blew out. Says the Marshal, in my opinion, even though you're not obligated to relight it, if you want to have the full mitzvah, yachsar v'yadlik, you should go and light it again without a bracha. It's not less than, you could get away with mitzvah with 1 candle, but we say there's a mitzvah of mahadrin to do many candles. So just like the many candles are a hidur, even though you don't need to rekindle, if you did kindle, it would be preferable. Then he adds, V'im kavsa be'erev Shabbos, everybody with me? If it extinguishes on Erev Shabbos, tzarech lachzor ulahadlik, v'lo kemaharai. Who's the Maharai? The Maharai is the author of the Trumas Hadeshen that we just read. So the Marshal, who's a contemporary of the Trumas Hadeshen, or a little bit young, actually not exactly. Trumas Hadeshen is like 15th century. The Marshal and the Shulchan Aruch are in the 16th century. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Trumas Hadeshen approvingly, and the Marshal, who was a contemporary of the Shulchan Aruch, he disagrees. He agrees with Jacob. He thinks that on Erev Shabbos, you have to light the candles, again, if it's before Kabbalah Shabbos. And this is also the view of the Taz, who lived a century after that, 17th century. If you look at the Taz, Sif Katan Tes, he quotes the Shulchan Aruch, and he says, Yeshli makom iyum b'dvarim elu, shehem b'trumas hadeshen simin kuf beis. He says, this view of the Trumas Hadeshen, I'm not comfortable with it. The Ati came, then he quotes it, and then he says, go down like 9 lines, v'lo nisyashvili dvarim elu. Right? That's if you lit it during the chiyuv, but it just didn't last the full amount of time. But it still was kindling, it was still burning during the zman chiyuv a little bit. Of course, on Shabbos, because it's a malacha, you can't light so late. You have to light much earlier. So it's true that, the earlier time you make the bracha and you're allowed to you make a bracha, it's considered a hadlaka. Al kain mutal hadlik b'shmanim apsulim b'Shabbos v'lo chashilin shemi yichabe da'azu mamish k'mo Shabbos atzmo, etc. V'im yadlik lifnei Kabbalah Shabbos in Achanami, right? The ein tzarich lachzor lahadlik, afilu b'chol hashmanim, ma she'ein ken kodem Kabbalah Shabbos, sheyesh adayin heter lahadlik, mi yomer lanu she'osa sha'ava k'mo achar kach, v'adai ein donin efshar mishi efshar. So listen, you can't light later. You can't light later, but if it goes out and there's still time before Shabbos, of course you should fix it. So there is, as you can see, a major debate in the poskim. To go back for a minute, there's an argument in the Gemara in general. If the candles go out before the half hour, are you obligated to reignite them? By the way, the Ramah in Shulchan Aruch says even in a regular case, if it goes out, like the Marshal says, you should lechatchila, you should light them just without a bracha. But if you don't, you haven't, you've still fulfilled the mitzvah. That's the principle of kavsa ein zakukla, and that's the psak of the Gemara, and that's the Rishonim, the Valitosis, the Rambam, the Tur, the Shulchan Aruch. Everybody paskins kavsa ein zakukla. Then there's a argument whether there's a lechatchila that you should still do it or not. That's the Ramah and the Marshal against the Mechaber and the Orzarua. Then there's another argument, and that is if you say kavsa ein zakukla, on Neiros Chanukah, we also say at Erev Shabbos when there's still time to light before Shabbos. On that, the Trumas Hadeshen and the Shulchan Aruch say you are not obligated to repeat the lighting even Erev Shabbos, while the Marshal in the 16th century and the Taz in the 17th century vociferously disagree. And they say that when it comes to Erev Shabbos, you would be obligated, if you weren't yet Makabel Shabbos, you would be obligated to rekindle the Ner, albeit without a bracha, so that it could light into the night. And by the way, the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan,
there's no one that says you do another bracha, right? There's no shita that.
No one's saying you should make another bracha, which is very interesting. Yeah. I'll get to that in a second as well. So, but the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan say you should be machmir according to the shita of the Maharshal and of the Taz, and not just let it go like the Trumas Hadeshen and the Shulchan Aruch. But what I want to try to explain in just a couple of more minutes is the following issue. Even the very fact that we paskin kavsa ein zakukla is surprising. And it's even more surprising if you paskin that, there's no need, even lechatchila, to light it back up, like the Shulchan Aruch against the Ramah. And it's even more surprising than that if you paskin like the Shulchan Aruch and the Trumas Hadeshen, that even Erev Shabbos early, there's no need to reignite. Why wouldn't there be? After all, in the end of the day, isn't Neiros Chanukah all about Persume Nisa? The Gemara says in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, on Daf Yud Ches Omid Beis, the Gemara, there was a list of holidays that were called Megillas Tainus, miracles that took place, that they made little Yamim Tovim, to commemorate, these miracles, to an anniversary of these miracles, to thank the Ribono Shel Olam. It's called Megillas Tainus. There was no Hesped, there was no Tainus on those days. Sometimes it would be a program, etc. So the Gemara says that, after the Churban, etc., the Megillas Tainus was batel. No more Megillas Tainus. Says the Gemara, well, how come that didn't affect Chanukah? So the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, because Chanukah had a Maisa mitzvah, Neiros Chanukah. And therefore that gave it permanent status and stature. And unlike Megillas, the list of Megillas Tainus, that is something that endures. Says the Gemara, so big deal. What do you mean it has a Maisa mitzvah? Livatel he, v'libatel mitzvasa. The Gemara says, so, if the rest of Megillas Tainus is no longer applicable because there's no Beis HaMikdash and it's not a happy time, So why don't you say that, so what if there's a mitzvah? Cancel the mitzvah and cancel Chanukah. So the Gemara says, shiny Chanukah because of Pirsumei Nisa. Meaning, one of the features that makes Chanukah unique is the fact that it publicizes the miracle. The Gemara says in Shabbos on Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph, the Gemara has a suffix. The Gemara says, do you insert Al Anisim in Birchas Hamazon on Chanukah or not? Of course, we know the answer because we do, right? We do insert
Anisim and benching.
Al Nisim in our benching, but the Gemara, this is because we paskin that way, but the way it's very interesting the way the Gemara asks the question. The Gemara says, Iboilahu, Ma'ul Haskir Shel Chanukah b'Birchas Hamazon. Should you not?
Why is it only Birchas Hamazon? I just want to ask.
That's a great question. That is a great question. Rashi on Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph says B'Tfila Pshitalan Sharei Lahalal Ohoda Nikbu K'Ramin Leil. So the Rashi asks your question, or you asking Rashi's question. Rashi says Tfila, it was obvious because since these are days of Halal and Hoda'ah, right? So that should express itself in prayer. But when it comes to Birchas Hamazon in the context of a meal, it's less obvious. Either way, the Gemara says, Iboilu, Ma'ul Haskir Chanukah b'Birchas Hamazon. Kivin b'drabanan hu lo mad karinan. Since it's only a rabbinic obligation, it shouldn't be reflected in the benching. Hodilma mishum Pirsumei Nisa mad karinan. Or maybe, since there's an element of Pirsa Manes, of spreading or disseminating, the hashgacha of the Rebbeinu Shalom Pirsa Manes, to advertise and publicize the miracle. So maybe even though it's rabbinic, you should put it in. And of course, we paskin that Megillus Tainus is batel, but Chanukah is chai v'kaya because of Pirsumei Nisa. And we paskin that in Birchas Hamazon, we do mention Al Anisim, even though it's Drabanan, because of Pirsumei Nisa.
Just to be clear, the Pirsumei Nisa is for Yidden or Goy or both?
Mostly for Jews, but definitely for non-Jews as well. I mean, your Madlik Bachutz, the Ad, Kalia, Adjetichla Regel Nashuk, the example that they give is, Tar Madoi, which are non-Jews. So it sounds like, even to non-Jews, we want to be Mefarsim the Nes.
Yeah, but I mean, where do we ever see, I was just thinking about it, this Chanukah, like such a concept, because it could work against us, meaning, right. Where do we ever see Pesach is all about us, Sukkot is about us, Shavuos is about us.
Mostly Chanukah is about us
Purim
too.
Is about us.
Well, Sukkot remember, Sukkot has a universal aspect too, the Parei Chag, the korbanos that were brought in the Beis Hamikdash, which were based on the 70, nations of the world.
Yeah, but we don't need goyim to see us eating in the sukkah. I'm saying the point is that we eat in the sukkah. We don't have to have a big sukkah that all the goyim see it. Shavuos, We're not supposed to learn and publicize our learning. Pesach, we don't have an open seder to the world.
They're not all
Purim is not an open.
I think what you're saying is even where there is Pirsumei Nisa, it starts for sure within the Jewish community. But it is very striking. I think your point is well taken, that it's a very striking difference, even to Megillah. The other major Pirsumei Nisa is Kriyas HaMegillah.
I was thinking, I guess, this more because anti-Semitism's up, but like, does it really? I mean, what do we want the Goyim to see? That we were saved? Like, what's the point? Like what?
No,
what
that we're giving Sheva, that we are appreciative of the miracles that were done to us. But it's not they're not the primary audience. They're just an additional audience. I mean, mostly the audience is a Jewish audience.
Right. Lubavitch, these big menorahs. I'm just saying.
That's Lubavitch,
Right.
That's another topic. I think there's an element of Pirsum L'Rabim. As I say, the Rashi gives the example of Tar Modai, which are non-Jews. But when Rashi says Achatichal Regel Menashuk, he means Jews and non-Jews, but he gives the example of non-Jews walking around. But I don't think it's because that's the primary audience. I think it's a way of showing the hustle and bustle of the society. And, like are people up and about, even if the Talmudoi are out there, the Jews are out there too. But when the other cultures are out there, usually the Jews are out there too.
So-
But there's no question that, again, there's a universal aspect to many. As I say, there's the Parei Chag on Sukkot. There's V'chein tein pachtecha Hashem Elokeinu al kol maasecha, v'yiraucha kol ha'maasim, v'yishtacha v'lefanecha kol ha'bruim, on the Yom Noraim. So it's not so surprising, but it's a good point.
There are several nes. There are several nes on for Chanukah. If you had to rank them, which one of the nesses do you rank first?
Well, right now we're talking about the nes of the Pach Hashem, and of course also the military victory.
I am succeeding over the Seleucid Greeks and cleaning up the Beit HaMikdash.
Right, all of it. I mean, I think it's all connected, really.
Returning to Carbonate, all of those are nes.
Right. Well, I think the celebration of Chanukah is, the rededication of the Mikdash is really basically a celebration of, being on the verge of losing our spiritual heritage,
right,
and recovering that, and that's expressed in different things. But I think all of the themes are connected to that in one way. Maybe I'll get back to that in the end, but that's part of a little bit of what I want to say, what I'm trying to get at. I don't have so much more time, but what the bigger point I'm trying to make is, how could you say Kavsa in Zakuk and say, oh, you did the Hadlaka, you did the best you could, that's good enough. If Pirsume Nisa, which is about the effect, other people, let's say Jews and non-Jews, seeing the lit candles is so important, why wouldn't you have to relight them? I'll give you another example. The placement of the menorah, and again, the timing of the menorah, of the lighting of the menorah, all reflect the impact, all reflect the effect, right? You're supposed to, again, we light now inside because it's considered makam zman sakana. But for example, in Eretz Yisrael, they light outside mostly, right? In Rosh Hashanah for Pirsum Nisa, and there's a debate between, Rashi and the Balei Tosas. Let's say you have like a yard or a courtyard, so do you light outside your tefach hasamuch to your back door, or tefach hasamuch to the door of your courtyard? Because that's even more Pirsumei Nisa.
The menorah in the Beit HaMikdash wasn't lit outdoors.
No, because that wasn't about Pirsumei Nisa. That was in the Heichal, right? That was in the Ol Moed. You're right. That's a great point. I'll get to that. That's also part of, I think, what I'm getting to. But that's a great point. You're not allowed to light, Lamala Me'esra Mama, because, Lo Shalad Ba Eina, it's called, meaning you can't, it's not good for Pirsumei Nisa. People have to strain their neck and they have to look so high, meaning the timing, the place, normally women would be exempt from mitzvah seishes man grama, from a time-bound mitzvah. But when it comes to Ner Chanukah, like Mikra Megillah and Daled Kosas, we say, Af hein hoyu ba'oswanes. They, were included in the nes, and therefore they celebrate the nes. It's part of Pirsumei Nisa. So the point is, Pirsumei Nisa is so central in Neres Chanukah. How could you say that Kavsa ein Zakukla, maybe not even L'chatchila, and maybe on Erev Shabbos, when it didn't even, no one even, actually experienced the light?
Oh, that's what I said, right.
So this is a question. I'll just give one other example, though, before I come to the punchline. If you look at the Ramah, this is towards the end of the Mar Makomos. I'm sorry, look at the Shulchan Aruch, and very, very end of the Mar Makomos. The last page, the very interesting psak. Excellent, exactly where you have it. So it says Shulchan Aruch, Aruch Chaim, the last piece, Hilchos Chanukah, Siman Taf Reish Ayin Vav Sif Beis, on the very bottom of the page. It says Meleil Rishon Be'elach, from the first night on, Mevarech Shtayim. Right after the first night, you make two brachos, Lahadlik Ner Shel Chanukah, V'Sha'asanit. Right, and then it says Hagah. That's now the Ramah is speaking. Till then, it was Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. V'yavarech kol habrachos kodem sheyatchil lahadlik. That's a quote of the Maril. It says, all the brachos, the 2 or 3 on the first night, should all be made before you light. What's so interesting about that? What are the 2 brachos that you typically make?
Shas and Nisam.
No, that's the second one. What's the first one?
Hadlik
Ner Shel Chanukah, right?
Right.
And the second one is Shas Nisim. Shas Nisim Lavosenu Bayamim.
I wasn't saying in that order, right? Okay. You said the 2.
So what some Rishonim say, if you look at Masachet Sofrim, and if you look at some of the Rishonim, they say, listen, what really makes sense here is that you should make the Hadlik Ner before you light, and you should make Shas Nisim after you light.
Oh,
We'll
interesting.
do this. I'll explain in a minute. That's what they said that, and some of the Mefarshim, some of the poskim say that. Why? Because lahadlik is a birchas hamitzvah. A birchas hamitzvah, we have a rule: kol hamitzvos mevarchen aleim over lasiyasa. All
Right.
mitzvos you make a bracha in advance before you do the mitzvah. However, she'asa nisim lavosenu, just the text itself, is not a birchas hamitzvah. Lehadlik to kindle is the mitzvah that you're about to do. But she'asa nisim lavosenu is, as birchas shevach b'hodah. It's a blessing of praise and thanksgiving.
Yeah, but first of all, that's very creative to split the brachas. I'm saying at the end of the day, we're saying lahadlik ner should be before, shas and Nisim afterwards.
No, I'm saying that would have made sense, and some of the Mefarshim actually say that. But the Ramah says everything goes first. Everything is in advance. Why?
Yep.
Meaning, according to the normal rules of Hilchos Brachos, a birchas shevach v'hodah should follow the experience. Like when you experience thunder and lightning, right? You don't make a bracha before the thunder and lightning.
Yeah, but by lulav you make the bracha before.
Because that's a mitzvah. On the tilas lulav.
Right, and here it's not a mitzvah there. I don't understand.
No, the hadlaka is the mitzvah, but the shas nisim is shevach v'hodah.
Is it, or maybe that's where you're coming to an answer? Maybe that's part of the mitzvah.
Well, I'm going to try to suggest something in a minute, but the words,
Right.
There's no question that it's shevach v'hodah. The question is, why is this shevach v'hodah atypically said before, according to the Ramah, and not after? By the way, there's another minhag, There's another view, or 2 other views. Some people say Shas Nisim after all the lighting. The Ramah says, and this is what most people do, I do this, you say everything before. There are some views that say that you make lahadlik before, and you make Shas Nisim after the first candle. Let's say it's the 4th night. So after the first candle, then you say Shas Nisim. Or some people say, if it's the 4th night, after the 3rd candle, before the 4th candle. Meaning there are 2 in-between views regarding, Shas Nisim. But it just shows you that there's a problem, or there's an issue. Okay, so why do you say it in advance? The answer is because the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is unique, for the reasons that we've been discussing. And its uniqueness expresses itself exactly in the problem that we are encountering. Namely, in most mitzvos, the Maisa mitzvah, the action, and the impact are 2 different things. Meaning the thanksgiving and the praise, are a result or a reaction, or an additional dimension, to the mitzvah. Like you say Hallel on Pesach and on Sukkot, right? But that has nothing to do with the matzah and with the sukkah, right? Here you also say Hallel, but the point is that the Birchas HaRoeh, Sh'asa Nisim Lavosenu, is a kind of a Hallel v'hodah, and it does have to do with the Hadlaka. What's the point? The point is that there is a merging of interests that makes Chanukah unique, in that the mitzvah itself, even the mitzvah of Hadlakas Neros, is about Hoda'ah and Hallel. Because, the whole point is that, we're thanking the Ribono Shel Olam for the opportunity to have been able to resuscitate our spiritual lives and perform these mitzvahs. that is the Shevach V'Hodah in a way, meaning Klal Yisrael found itself, divorced, from meaningful opportunities to express our religious commitment and observance. And, symbolically through the Nes Pach HaShemen, right, that was reestablished. We were able to reconnect with that idea. So it's not only that there's a mitzvah, the mitzvah is an expression of halav. That's why there's so much Persumei Nisa in the mitzvah of Neiros Chanukah. Who lights, where you light, the timing that you light it, etc. And for that reason, what's normally Shevach V'Hodah, according to the Ramah, is actually brought into the mitzvah part, to the Birchas HaMitzvah part. So it's true that the text of Shas HaNisim, what the words mean is Shevach V'Hodah, but Shevach V'Hodah here is not a separate and additional component. It's part and parcel of the Hadlaka itself. And that's why it defines who lights, where you light, when you light, and therefore even its brachos are integrated in advance of the Hadlaka. They become the Birchas Shevach V'Hodah here are part of the Birchas HaMitzvah. However, that could be misleading and lead you to think that the lighting is just a means of Pirsum Hanes, meaning the lighting isn't really the mitzvah. The lighting is just a hechatimtzi. It's just a way of creating the burning candles. It's the burning candles that are the symbol of Chanukah. That's what you could think. But the real truth is that the opposite is true. What we're really celebrating, is the ability to be mefarsei misanes, the ability to do mitzvos, the ability to do the hadlaka. Now, the hadlaka is defined as an action which is impactful. It's part of the definition of hadlaka is that there be enough shemen and that it be in the right place and at the right time that it can last for the sake of Persumei Nisa. But it's not, the hadlaka is not just, the means to achieve the goal of the burning candles of hadlaka, of Persumei Nisa. It's the opposite. Persumei Nisa is a shiur. It characterizes the nature of the mitzvah hadlaka. The real focus is actually on the ability to perform mitzvahs. And therefore, what we're being told is there's no contradiction between Pirsum Hanes and hadlaka. And they're also not, it's not true that hadlaka is just a means for Persumei Nisa. And it's also not true that there are two different and completely separate components, Pirsum Hanes and hadlaka. The real idea is that we are celebrating the ability to do hadlakas neiros Chanukah, which is part of that mitzvah is the capacity to be mefarseim, the special hashgacha, special divine intervention and special relationship that the Ribono Shel Olam has with the Jewish people. Therefore, the rule actually is kapsa ein zakukla. It's very important for the halacha to tell you that if you do the hadlaka properly, even if it doesn't actually produce the result of Persumei Nisa, as long as it's done properly and has the potential for Persumei Nisa, it's actually the hadlaka which is the primary focus of Chanukah. It's the ability to do mitzvos. It's the ability to accomplish Persumei Nisa in a substantive spiritual way. Many religions focus on, the effect, a symbol. In Yadus, one of the unique features is precisely the emphasis on mitzvos, on actually doing something, which is measured, which is invested, with a certain stature. And in the case of Neiros Chanukah, that's what the Gemara means in Rosh Hashanah, where the Gemara says that, Megillas Tainus, all the list of other miracles that were commemorated, they didn't make it, after the Korban. They were, the whole list, was dropped. And the Gemara says, well, why is Chanukah any different? Says the Gemara, Chanukah was different because of the mitzvah of Hadlaka. And the Gemara says, well, livatel ihu v'livatel mitzvase. If there's no Chanukah, there'll be no mitzvah. Says the Gemara, no. The potential of Persume Nisa makes it different. But the Gemara didn't say Persume Nisa is the reason that Chanukah lasts. The Gemara says Persume Nisa is a characteristic of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is the reason that it lasts. So the takeaway from all this is that while Chanukah's focus is on its impact, right, that shouldn't mislead us into thinking that the mitzvah that we do is simply a means to an end, and that the primary, is the effect. Halachic effects require halachic, intrinsic, substantive vehicles. And it's the vehicle, it's the mitzvah of Hadlaka Sneros Chanukah, that really defines, the holiday. When the Gemara in Shabbos, characterizes, the establishment of the holiday, they say kivaum va'asaum. The Smag, Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol, one of the Balei Tosas, says the kivaum, what really established and made permanent the mitzvah of Chanukah, was the mitzvah of Neros Chanukah, the mitzvah of the lighting itself. And therefore, to bring greater focus on the importance of the lighting, we actually paskin that kavsa ein zakukla. If you want to, you can, reignite the flame. But even on Erev Shabbos, according to the Trumas Hadeshen, and if you don't go that far, but certainly, during the week, kavsa ein zakukla is not leniency in Persume Nisa. It's just a way of highlighting that the Persume Nisa is all the more effective when it's connected with and it comes or stems from the mitzvah of Hadlaka. Okay, so that is the idea that we wanted to present this evening. If there are any questions, there are a lot of other issues to discuss, but since we started a little late, I don't want to take any more.
So I was thinking, Rabbi, so you could have
scholarship.
One at a time. I can't hear.
What would your conduct be in case the lights went out?
Louder.
Say that one more time.
You considering your extensive research and scholarship on the issue, how would you conduct yourself if your lights went out after 10 minutes?
So the Ramah says that you should light. But I would do it. But if you do it without a bracha, and I would light it for the rest of the period.
And Erev Shabbat?
And Erev Shabbat even more so, as long as it's before Kabbalah Shabbos, though. As long as it's before you were Makabel Shabbos. Once you're Makabel Shabbos, of course, you can't. But either way, without a bracha. What's very interesting is the following. Some of the Achronim ask an interesting question. There's something called the Birchas Haroah. That's the bracha of Sh'asa Nisim La'avoseinu B'yamim Ha'hem Bazman Hazeh. Now, if you don't have your own Chanukah, your own menorah, you can make that bracha by seeing somebody else's menorah. But what's interesting is that when it comes to Erev Shabbos, no one says that you should wait until the actual Zman before you make the Birchas Haroah. Meaning you could have had somebody suggest the following idea. You have to be madlik before Shabbos because you can't light on Shabbos. And of course, if you're going to be madlik, you have to make a bracha. So you say lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. But why not wait and say the bracha of Sh'asa Nisim La'avoseinu, just like a roeh would on Shabbos, when it's already burning? There's no violation of Shabbos if you say Sh'asa Nisim La'avoseinu. But what you see is, but no, that would be an interesting suggestion, right? No one does it. it's clear that you're not supposed to do it. Otherwise,
Right.
I would have said to do it. Why? Wouldn't it be better to make the Birkas Haroa on Shabbos when it's in Zman, when it's actually burning? But I think it's exactly the point that I've been trying to make, which is we don't want to split the Hadlaka and the Pirsam Hanes. We want the Pirsam Hanes itself to be an outgrowth of the substance of the act of the mitzvah. And that is a critical idea. And therefore, even though objectively it might seem preferable to make the Birkas Haroa, when it's already dark outside on Shabbos, and there's no violation of a malacha, it's still preferable to integrate it with the Hadlaka for the same reason that Kavsa is Ein Zakukla, even though it's nice, the Chatchila without a bracha to reunite if you can, if it's early enough. But in the end of the day, not to lose sight that there's a principle behind Kavsa Ein Zakukla. And that's the idea. Jacob, you had a question?
Yeah, what I was trying to say earlier is, so if someone were to light with candles the entire week,
right.
So you are Yotze, I think if it's lit for 30 minutes or so, right? But I'm saying,
right.
but even if you're lighting with candles during the week, like at Shabbos, you should definitely light with oil, just because you need.
Or they have longer candles, but yeah, you for Erev Shabbos you must have candles or oil that
can
last
light a certain amount of time.
In theory, meaning in terms of the amount, last
right.
30 minutes after the Zman.
Which means like an hour. It needs to last an hour from.
Right. That means you have to use oil or longer or bigger. Some people use like Shabbos candles, or they have these thinner candles, but they're very tall, or oil. Now, again, if it goes out, that's what we were discussing. That's
those all share. Okay, thank you.
Rabbi, may I throw in also?
Sure.
There's a question about whether you light the candles after one bracha or after two brachot. I thought the compromise was that
no. We light after two. The rabbi was being creative, but we light after two, right, Rabbi?
There's an argument. The Ramah says that we light after two. There are other poskim who say that you light after one, and then either you do the second bracha when you finish, or right before the last candle, or right after the first candle. But
we don't pass that way.
But the psak of the Shulchan Aruch of the Ramah is like my Rebbe, Rav Soloveitchik. He used to, I believe he used to say Sha'asa Nisim Lavosenu after he lit the first candle.
Really?
Yeah. Or either that or before he lit the last candle. But in the psak of the Shulchan Aruch, which I follow, the psak of the Ramah is to say all three or all two, depending on the whether it's the first day or the others, in advance. And I actually, for the reasons that I just explained, I think that it makes a lot of sense, even though it's unusual. But I've tried to explain, why it's unusual, because it's a special blend of the substance of the mitzvah and the hodah and the shevach, meaning the effect of the mitzvah, which I think is a special hallmark of what Chanukah is really all about.
So I assume all the briskers, Soloveitchik probably does what the briskers do, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
Let me finish the other question. That is,
sure.
I thought for some reason that you started lighting the candles in the middle of the second bracha when you say Shas Anisim, Baruch Hashem Elohim.
You say Shasani, you say Lahadlik Ner Shel Chanukah, according to the Ramah. Then you say Shas Anisim Lavosenu, and you finish, and then you start lighting. But what people also do is after the first Ner, then they start singing Haneros Halal.
Okay, thank you.
Meaning the brach of Sha'as Anisim you've completed, then you start lighting, and after you light the first candle, let's say it's the fourth day, right? Or today was the second day. So after the first candle, you start singing Haneros Halalu as you're lighting the second, the third, the fourth, etc. Got it? Okay.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank
Fairly
you.
Chanukah.
Sameach. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll continue
Chanukah
next
Sameach
week.
to you all.
Back with usual, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
I'll
you
let
so
you know
much,
if there's
Rabbi.
a change in the
Thank
schedule.
you. תודה
Thank
רבה.
you, Rabbi. Bye bye.